Welcome back to the Porter Report Head Coach Showcase. I'm Riley Frain, and this afternoon we have on yet another very special guest in Northern Colorado men's basketball head coach Steve Smiley. Coach, thanks so much for coming on and giving us a bit of your time.
You bet. Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course, thank you so much. All right, so just first off, Coach, I know it's been a busy offseason for you and the staff, but how are you doing? Have you had a chance to really breathe since announcing your official roster for the 2023-24 season?
Honestly, no, have not had much of a chance to breathe. It's so different, and it's hard. I think this profession, it's always been hard. It's always been extremely demanding, and unless you're in it, you don't really understand it. But I do think that the workload or just the fact that you can't ever really put the off button, you can't push that off button. It's a real thing, at least right now. I mean, because with the portal, and I know we're going to talk about the portal, but with the portal, you know, you push back your class, your roster. I mean, obviously some programs are still signing 2, 3, 4 guys. Now we're done. We're already into summer workouts, but just trying to build your roster, it pushes so far into May. And then what people understand is that it's not just signing a kid. Then you got to get them accepted. You got to get them, matriculated to your university, housing, enrolled in class, all the different stuff. And so May turns into this chaotic time. And I think the way that we're built, we always have camp season at the start of June, which that's been every year, but it's really important for us. It helps us, obviously with our players, our staff, it's a big deal out here. So early June has always been the hardest time anyways, because you have basically camp 9 out of 10 days. And so now you got all this pressure of the roster finishing up, and you have two massive things going on at the same time. You get through that, and then boom, you're on the road recruiting, you're doing practice. And so it's great. I wouldn't change it for anything, but it's hard right now. It's there's been not a lot of downtime.
Yeah, absolutely. I could imagine all over the road. It certainly could get crazy. So, but before we get, really talk about that roster and some of the newest additions, I just want to take a moment to reflect on, the ups and downs of last season. Obviously, you guys played some ranked opponents, battled in a really tough Big
Yeah.
Sky conference. But I just want to ask, Coach, what are some of the things you want to build on, from the previous campaign heading into next year?
Well, I think, I would be lying if I didn't say from a wins loss perspective, it was a disappointing season. There were some expectations coming into it, and rightfully so. Had some really good players returning with, Dalen Kuntz, Matt Johnson, Dalton Connect. And so I don't think we've met the expectations that we internally put on ourselves. I mean, people can put whatever expectations they want on you anyways, but, we thought we'd have a chance to be really good. But at the same point in time, sometimes that scoreboard, right? Like it can really mess with your mind in the sense of, we were about 5 or 6 games, including league games, that we lost on the last possession or in overtime or missed a free throw or whatever it is. And if you win the majority of those, all of a sudden you go from a 12-20 team to a 17-15 team by just a couple possessions. And that's how fine the line is between winning and losing. And so I do think that, for us, how do you win those close games? And I spend so much time watching the end of the game, the special situations. How do you manage those things? And I think the year before, like if you look at our Ken Palm the year before, we won 22 games, which was the third most in school history. But our Ken Palm number was almost identical to last year when we won 12 games. We weren't much different of a team, but we pulled out some really close games if you're into the analytical stuff. So there's a lot to build on. I think, we've got 8 guys coming back. I think our culture and all that, all those buzzwords is really good. Guys understand it. We had a lot of young kids as well that, there were some growing pains last year. And so being able to move those kids through the process, and now have a chance to have, theoretically bigger roles, they've done a great job, had a great spring, and now 8 returners and 7 new guys now meshing that together. But I do think there's still a lot of positives. I mean, we won at Colorado State, I think for the first time in 40 or 50 years. It's a big win for us. Weber State, who's really good, and I'm sure will be picked to win our league this year, had that very rare national TV Big Sky game, and it all clicked that night. I think we won by 30 or 40, which, we played really well. Now, you wish you could have got to that level more, right? Like, why couldn't we have done that more? And those are things that, I'll always take the blame and study myself first and what we're doing. But I do think that there were some positives. I think there's some really exciting things with some of our talent coming back and then some of the new guys. So, and then, off the court, the fans sometimes don't care as much, but I'm proud of our guys. We had the best GPA in our department on the men's side, which is pretty rare for, Division I men's basketball, all the things that we're doing in our community. So I don't think it was a complete failure, but there's no doubt probably should have won some more.
So maybe something of a, obviously a lot to build on, but maybe something of a fresh slate kind of heading into this offseason. But before we really even get there, I think some of the buzzwords you kind of mentioned there, culture, I think, really the challenges of trying to mesh a new group together. And before we, get to talking about some of the new faces that will be joining your roster, I wanted to ask, with so much roster turnover from year to year, you mentioned, a couple of the guys who hit the transfer portal, some graduating seniors on your roster from last year. So, in this modern transfer portal era, it's really a battle that all mid-major coaches are constantly facing with so much roster turnover from season to season. So for you, coach, what are some of the challenges of, trying to implement that culture you want within your program, especially with so many new guys who are coming into the locker room?
I think it's a great challenge. And I think that, things have changed so much in the last 4 years, 3 years. I mean, we've never had much roster turnover, and we've never really been hit hard by the portal, and we got hit hard this year, obviously. And so, again, it just is what it is. And with the rules being where they are, where a kid can go, and then you kind of factor in, other things too, NIL and things like that. It's just, this is what the nature of the beast is. And so you just got to look at it. You got to look at the kids that want to be here. And I think we're really fortunate that we have 8 returning players. That's still over half our roster, and kids that really understand what we want to do. So how do you mesh those with the new guys? I think that's the biggest challenge. I think for us, we kind of start getting into the roster a little bit just philosophically. If you look at our roster this year, the goal in recruiting was to get a little bit older. A year ago, we took 4 true freshmen, some 17, 18-year-old kids, and really good players, but at a different stage of their career as our older guys. Matt Johnson coming into last year, that was his 6th year at UNC, right? So just different ages. Where this year in recruiting, we tried to align a little bit more where the majority of our team will have 2 to 3 years of college basketball left. Not a lot of guys that this is their last year, but not a lot of guys that this is their first year. We're kind of sitting in that middle realm of, it's hard to say if they're juniors or sophomores, but guys that have like 2 years left, some that have 3, but not much younger than that in terms of the new guys. And that's why we took 3 portal guys, 2 JUCO guys, and only 1 high school guy on scholarship. And that was kind of the goal, is to try to get a little bit older and to try to, synchronize the ages of our entire roster. That was the goal.
All right. So I think that's a great segue into, talking about some of the guys you did pick up this offseason. And I want to start with the 2 more veteran pieces, if you will. I know you said it's kind of tough whether to tell maybe they're sophomores or juniors, but
Yeah.
you added St. Thomas, a 6'7" forward from Loyola Chicago, as well as Jaron Riley, a 6'3" guard from Sanford. And, both players who maybe flew a little under the radar. So I want to ask, Coach, what excites you and the staff most about each of their additions to the program this offseason?
Yeah, those are 2 great guys to start off with. Starting with Saint, I think that Saint, obviously a super talented guy. I think in high school, he was like a top 240, 250 guy in the country, which that level of high school recognition doesn't usually land in the big sky.
Mm-hmm.
So getting Saint out of the transfer portal, we're really excited about him. Now, he didn't play in the spring, so was he going to be in shape? Was he going to be rusty? And I'll just say that, we're already through, I think, 4 weeks of summer workouts. And what blows me away with Saint is not only is he talented, because he's really talented, big wing, play 3-4, 4-3, whatever you want to do. We can move him around in some different spots, but his motor, his competitiveness has been just awesome. And I do think he's for sure one of our most talented, if not most talented players. He's right up there. And, as a coach, obviously, if your best player or your most talented player, if they're not your hardest worker, it's going to be hard. And he's really set a standard, especially for a new guy to come in here and just establish from day one, I'm going to play really hard, especially when we don't have games for 4 or 5 months. You know what I mean? So he's done a great job of that. So that's been really good. And then Jaron, same thing. Jaron had 3 really productive seasons at Sanford out in Alabama on winning teams. And so, and even going back to St. Loyola Chicago, winning team, and he came in here with some really, really elite winning habits. Jaron's the same way. He's been well coached. He's been a part of winning. He knows what winning is. His dad's a high-level professional head basketball coach in Australia in the NBL. And so he's been around winning his whole life. And so those guys, as you plug them in, yeah, they got to learn the system and terminology, but they don't need to learn what winning looks like on a day-to-day. So they've both been great. I do expect them both to have really big roles for us and be really good players in our league.
And so next up, a guy who maybe offers a little more to the future of your program. I know you talked about, in terms of scouring the transfer portal, looking for guys with more eligibility on the younger side. So you added a freshman guard from a local program in Marcel McCreary, who's arriving from Air Force, where he played in some limited minutes this past season, but provided a lot both offensively and defensively in those limited minutes. So for you, coach, what do you like about his game, and what do you think he offers to the future of your program as he continues to develop?
Yeah, when Marcel went in the portal, first of all, we played Air Force last year, and he was just okay in that game. He played maybe 5, 8 minutes, so it wasn't like, hey, we saw this kid in the portal that just torched us or anything. But when he went in the portal, he eventually was one of the final two kids we signed. He was one of the later guys that we signed. And as I looked into it more, limited minutes, but at the same point in time, he had a couple big time games. Air Force went into CSU and beat them, and I think he had like 26 points in that game. And you just think about it and say, look, there's not a lot of freshmen that could do that anywhere, right? And so that was intriguing to start off with. And then you look at it, he followed that up with a big game at Fresno State, and he was the Mountain West Freshman of the Week. Again, small sample size, but showed that against legitimate good Mountain West teams, he could get to a level that some kids can't get to. And then as we just kind of dug into it through, the basic recruiting side of trying to get his background stuff, high school coach, and really talking to the Air Force coaches, they were great. You always, as a coach, try to go through this and try to eliminate kids, right? Like, why would you not take a kid? And we just didn't have a good reason. Everyone had said good things about him. He played at Air Force Prep, in his prep year. His stats were on synergy, and I think he was like 49 for 100 from three in that year, like really proved that he could shoot it. So I went back and watched some of his synergy in prep school, and when he was kind of a featured piece, and I was like, man, this kid can really shoot it. We lack shooting. We need shooting. Everyone we brought in had to be able to shoot it. That was a non-negotiable, because I thought we struggled last year at that at times. And so I knew he could shoot it. Big, strong guard. And he just seemed to be at that point in time a good fit for us. So you're right. He has 3 years left. He's he's the youngest portal guy we got, but 3 years left. And I think he's got a chance to be a really good player for us. And he's a great kid.
So to round out the grouping here, you bought in a pair of JUCO recruits in Mackay Cameron as well from Cali College, excuse me, and DeJour Reeves from Trinidad State. But I'm curious about recruitment at the JUCO level, and so I was wondering if you could talk about your relationships with both those guys prior to joining Northern Colorado, as well as maybe a little bit about the process of evaluating how you think their talent will transition to the Division I level in the Big Sky.
Yeah, so one guy at a time. And I guess just recruiting junior college. And Coach Farringer did a great job, kind of as the lead recruiter on those guys. He's been a JUCO head coach at 3 or 4 different spots. I was a JUCO head coach for 6 years, and then Coach Reed on our staff was a JUCO head coach for 10 plus years. So I think we have it's something like 23 years on our staff of junior college head coaching experience. So we do believe in it. It's more selective in terms of we need to have the junior college kid to be a need for us. Mackay Cameron, he's the only kid we signed in the fall. We only had 2 scholarships because we knew that Matt and Dalen were the only 2 guys that would be done. So we didn't want to overdo it. But with Mackay Cameron, 1, coached really well at Cali College. 2, big, strong guard. 3, could really shoot it. And again, shooting was a big thing for us. So we identified him early on, put a lot of time into it in the fall, and got lucky enough for him to come up on a visit and then eventually commit to us. So, and he's been great. I see him as a guy that could play 2 or 3 for us, just as a bigger guard. One of our probably best options, running off screens, being like in a sniper role. But what's been good about him is that he's been a lot more advanced than I realized in terms of being able to put the ball on the floor, into play in the paint, and do different things for different guys. So he's been great. And then DeJour Reeves is a guy that we identified for really 2 years at Trinidad State. And, they went to Hutch 2 years in a row, and Coach Fulda, their coach, does a great job. But Trinidad State hasn't gone to Hutch like a ton in that Region 9. And DeJour Reeves, I just believe he's a winner. I think he's a guy that, for whatever reason, sometimes guys just help you win. And so that was the initial part of it. But, watching him through the fall and the jamborees and recruiting him, we were recruiting him all year long. We really ramped it up in the spring before Hutch. I remember going down there to see him practice right before they went to Hutch. And at that point, I felt like, we had a pretty good chance of getting him. But being in that junior college world, that 1 or 2 good games at Hutch can change everything, because there's going to be 200 Division I schools there. and he had a great game, and they played a phenomenal game, lost the buzzer to one of the best teams. Coulda, woulda, shoulda type of situation, but he was awesome. And after that, started getting really nervous because there were several schools that kind of popped in the mix. If you look at his timeline and the verbal commits and things like that, his recruitment activity exploded, after that tournament. So I just think though that it was a great fit for him. I think he looked at it that, hey, look, we recruited him for a long time. He was comfortable with us. He's been in the state of Colorado because Trinidad State's in Colorado. So even though he's from New York, he's been out here for 2 years, and it's been great. And he's got a chance to be a really special player. He's a second team All-American, junior college player, and was really close to being a first team All-American, which again is hard to get a kid of that caliber in our league. So we're really glad we have him. And the thing that's great about him is not only can he really score it, he averaged 23 a game for 2 straight years, but in addition to that, he can play off the ball too. He can play off the ball where a kid like him and Jaron, really, for instance, that are both, dominant guards, they need the ball in their hands. They can both play with the ball outside of their hands and really put pressure on the defense. So we thought he was a perfect fit, and we're very lucky to have him.
All right. So before we end off here, Coach, just again, thank you so much for joining us today and talking about the program. And so to send us off, I want to kind of set you up for the last question. We talked a little about building on last season, some of the off-season turnover you guys have had to deal with, but also the exciting additions from the portal and your roster's construction for 2023-24. But with the off-season workouts now surely underway, as you mentioned, what's your message to the Northern Colorado fan base, to get them pumped for Bears basketball again?
Yeah, I think that every season now is going to be to some degree a completely different team, and you've got to, as opposed to the good old days where you're like, hey, 3, 4, or 5 year vision. It's not just win now or get a good team and the next year get a good team, but every year is going to look a little different. And so I do think that for us, I'm just watching our guys and working with our guys in the spring or in the summertime. They are going so hard. Their competitive spirit right now is off the charts, especially for the time of year that it is. So I'm so excited to eventually, months from now, put a product out there. And I think it's the type of team, our community likes hard-nosed kids. They like kids that really compete. I believe we have a team that's going to really compete. I think our league's wide open. I think someone, on the road last week, we were talking to another one of the head coaches of the Big Sky. I think one of those coaches said that 30 of the 33 best players in the Big Sky are gone, whether graduated or in the portal. So like 95% of the top players from last year are not here, which to me, just all that means is it's wide open. And I really believe that. And I think that it's very hard to project. Are we going to be top 2, 8? Nobody knows. But I do know that all we can control is what we do in the gym. And right now, I think our guys, our entire program, we're handling that and we're working really hard. So I think it's going to be a team that our community and our campus, they're going to love watching.
Sounds like lots to be excited about in Northern Colorado. Certainly a lot of new faces to get familiar with, but some guys will hopefully find some success for your program. Coach Steve Smiley, thank you again for joining us.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.